Truth Frequency.
Your protection from deception. This is Truth Frequency Radio.
From the biggest little city in the world in the clear blue waters of Lake Tahoe, broadcasting from an undisclosed location in the Truckee River Valley on Truth Frequency Radio, this is the Awakening Liberty Show with Sean Carone.
If you came to prove, there's no reason to prove. Got yourself something funky.
Well, good Saturday morning to you all, afternoon or night, depending on where you are. Welcome to the Awakening Liberty Show with me, your humble host, Sean Carone. I had to laugh here. Dr. Kayak in the chat room says, wow, I haven't heard this intro in so long, having strange flashbacks. Yeah, it's been a while, and I'm back. Today's a third show. I was on TFR for a long time. It was like over 2 years, and it was such a joy being there, being on TFR, and it's so good to be back. And I just thank everybody for all the words of encouragement and all the emails as well, and all the emails I got this week, because everybody knew last Saturday I got on there with Dr. Sherelle Needham, and I was pretty sick. I'm recovering now, but boy, it feels like I have a bunch of dice rolling around in my chest. So I may break out into hacking today. I hope not, but I'm starting to feel a little bit better. It's a strange crud that's been going around, certainly here in Elko. We are sitting here at the base of the Ruby Mountains. It's another snowy day, and we've certainly had a lot of snow this year. But we are live. We are worldwide on TFRlive.com, all across America, all around the world. The number to call in if you want to join the conversation is 213-233-3998. And wherever you are, make it TFR. You can always call and listen by phone at 641-793-7117. Thanks again, Dr. Kayak. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad to be back. We are also live on IPMNation.com. iHeartRadio, and the TuneIn network as well. So a big shout out to all of you folks. I hope this broadcast finds you well. Again, I'm a little under the weather still, but it's getting better. Coming up in just a few minutes, I am excited to welcome back Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Mankind. On tap for today's show is Chapter 13, which is Lucifer's Revenge. It's one of my favorite chapters in the whole book. The whole book is just incredible. I mean, it's just a mass of information, a plethora of ancient knowledge that Gary has put together. So it's just an incredible book. Gary is a Christian contrarian who has maintained a lifelong affair with biblical prophecy, history, and mythology. He's looked at everything, the Bible and Gnostic scriptures, and he's gone into all the secret societies and put this all together in this book. So if you haven't seen it yet or you haven't read it yet, definitely check it out. It's well worth the time. It's well worth the read. I always have it sitting right next to me, and he'll be coming up here in just a few minutes. A couple of housekeeping items get out of the way. The website is up and running with the new calendar, awakeninglibertyshow.com. Again, that's awakeninglibertyshow.com. Stop by, check it out. You can see the calendar and the full list of people who are coming up on the show. I'm already booked out till like the end of April, so it's just amazing. Everybody's been coming out and saying, "Hey, we want to get back on your show." So, pardon me, my chest is a little tight here this morning. So, yeah. That's the way it is. But anyway, awakeninglibertyshow.com. Stop by, check it out. You can see the calendar there. You can also check me out on Facebook, Sean Carone. That's S-E-A-N, Carone, C-A-R-O-N. Stop by on Facebook. Check me out there. I've also got the Awakening Liberty Show page on Facebook, so you can always check that out as well. And for all of you who haven't heard my show in the past when I was on TFR before, like I said, it's been a 15-month hiatus, but it's great to be back. You can go to YouTube, Awakening Liberty Show, again on YouTube, Awakening Liberty Show, and you can check out all of the old shows. There's probably nearly 200 videos on there. And we may be making a change with YouTube. Who knows? YouTube has demonetized my channel, and they won't really tell me why. It's tough. They're censoring a lot of people. And, that's just the way Google is. It is their platform. We can moan about it all we want, but until somebody actually brings up an antitrust lawsuit against YouTube, I don't think we're going to have any effectiveness over there in trying to get this censorship platform that is happening to everybody who's talking about anything beyond the official narrative. If we're questioning the official narrative, they don't want it on their YouTube. They're saying that the advertisers don't want it on YouTube, and they're not going to monetize your channel, which doesn't make any sense to me. Even if you boil it down to somebody who likes, forks and somebody who likes spoons. I mean, if you look at it in that regard, the person who likes spoons still is going to buy the product. The people that like forks are still going to buy the advertiser's product. So I don't understand why the advertisers are, I think it's just YouTube pawning it off on something that's really not accurate. But that's the way YouTube is going right now. So I'd like to start off today's show with a prayer. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Before I bring Gary on, I want to talk a little bit about it. And I'm going to get Gary's take on it as well. I want to give everybody a little bit of a fair warning about what's going to be coming up over the next month or so. For those of you that have listened to me in the past, that controversy is not something I steer away from. In fact, I'll take it head on. And as I contemplated coming back to radio, I started getting on social media a little bit more. And I experienced some of this in my personal life, too, being a Christian. There seems to be a whole lot of division in the body of Christ right now, whether it be in a truth community or whether it be within your church or whatever you're fellowshipping in. There is a huge division. And it's starting to bother me. And I don't think the subject is avoidable. I mean, we have to talk about this. And what I'm talking about is Torah observance. And we're going to explore this over probably the next 4 weeks or so. We're going to have both sides of it. We're going to have some Torah observant people. We're going to have some people who don't believe that the Torah really has any application to modern day Christianity. I'm sort of in the middle, but I will be bringing this to you because I want to look at the debate from both sides. But what I'm seeing right now is a huge division. And the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10:23, he says, all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. So when we start talking about the Torah, what I'm seeing, in my humble opinion, is if you are going to be Torah observant, it seems to raise a lot of animosity. It's not necessary to observe the Torah, but it often leads, when you do, to very serious sin. That's a sin of pride. And that's where this division starts coming in. The keeping of Torah leads to many sorrows because, again, we're dividing the body of Christ. There's splits and divisions within denominations, congregations, and even families. Endless arguments and bickering, cutting off fellowships. I mean, there's acrimony, there's bitterness, there's hurt feelings, and there's damaged people. As Paul said, in other words, it might be lawful, but it doesn't edify. It doesn't build up. Quite the opposite. What I'm seeing now within the body of Christ is relationships that are being destroyed. There's chaos, there's confusion and disharmony in the body, and it creates divisions and acrimony that help absolutely no one except the enemy. I don't have a problem. If you want to follow the Torah, that's fine. There are certain things you won't be able to follow, such as the animal sacrifices. There's no temple and this, that, and the other thing. But it was also said very clearly that we are no longer under the schoolmaster. So we're gonna take this subject on, this controversy on, within the church, within the fellowship, within the body of Christ. We're going to take it on over the next 4 or 5 weeks. We're going to have multiple guests on. Pastor Dean Odell will be on. Brother Josh will be on next week. We're going to be talking about, actually April 6th, we'll be talking about foundations in Torah. and why this is going on right now. So it's something that's important to me, and it's something that I'm seeing. It's causing me some distress, some disharmony. It's like, why? So I want to take it on. We're going to cover it, and we're going to give you guys both sides of the story so that you guys can make up your own minds. So that's kind of what's going to be coming up. I just want to give you all fair warning. And right now, I want to introduce back to the show Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Gary, how are you doing?
I am doing just fine, and probably a little better than what you are this morning by the sounds of it. But so happy and glad to be back with you, and glad that you're back where you should be, doing the things that you ought to be, and very much looking forward to our discussion this morning.
Absolutely, I am too. You know, I first I want to ask you, got anything new going on? Have you been writing anything new? What's going on in your world?
Well, I've come to a bit of a slowdown on my second book because I've been so busy with interviews and promoting my current book, so I need to get back on that. So it's going to be a little different direction than the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and more into prophecy, although my publisher is also really pushing for a sequel to the Genesis 6, so I'm looking at that as well. So, but those things are probably next year country before any of that's going to get completed. I am currently doing a online summit, prophecy summit, with Ray Gano and his group that sort of skirts around what you're talking about with Google censorship, where you don't have to fly to a conference, but it's the End Times Warrior Conference, and you just Google Ray Gano on that, and you go on there, and you can go in any time that you want. There's a whole list of speakers that are speaking online, and it's left up there for a long period of time, so that it's one way of getting the information out. I'm also doing another conference down in Dallas at the end of March, the Hear the Watchers Conference, and the theme of that is Sound the Alarm. So again, a very, very impressive array of speakers down there. So yeah, pretty active schedule, and having fun doing it too.
Absolutely. Well, your book is just incredible. Like I've said before, it sits next to me most of the time. In fact, I'll go to the Bible to pick up something, and I'll read it, and then I'll go to the Genesis 6 Conspiracy just to get your take on it as well. It's absolutely a great read, phenomenal read, and I would suggest everybody go get it. Where can they get the book, Gary?
Well, you can go to my website if you want a signed copy, and that's the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6 with the number 6 conspiracy.com. And on there, I've got a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters. So you get a very good feel for the book. So you can get a signed copy there, or you can also click over to the Kindle version if you want a digital copy. And from the website, you can click into barnesandnoble.com and Amazon.com and Amazon.ca if you reside in Canada. And my book is distributed by Bookmasters, so if you did want to just promote your local bookstore and they don't have it on the shelf, they can order it in. And in Canada, it's available on most stores in Chapters and Indigos.
Very good, very good. Like I said, everybody go check out the book. It's phenomenal, and get yourself a signed copy too, because I don't know. I have a feeling this book is going to have a long life. It's not going to be something that gets shelved. So it's certainly within the Christian community. When I read the book first time, Gary, and it's 1,000 pages. It's a long read, but the way you set it up was great because it's just small chapters and sections, so you can take them one at a time.
Yeah, each chapter is a mini story that leads into the next chapter and will keep coming up as the book unfolds, so that you can go back and reread that chapter. And the average chapter length is about 6 pages, so they're short stories. And this way you can come back anytime that you want, pick it up, drop it, because it's not a fast read, and I don't recommend that people try and do a fast read on it, because there is just so much information in it. It just won't sink in.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the book at the top of the next segment, but I wanted to get your take, Gary, on what you see going on now in the body of Christ and this whole Torah observant thing. What is your take on this, and is it bothering you too, what we're seeing?
It's not bothering me, but it is something that is becoming more and more divisive, I think, and causing grief when we shouldn't be having grief within the body of Christ. In fact, even in my group, I had a discussion. My Facebook group is what do we want to do about people coming in and with the Torah observant, legalistic approach to things. And I am tolerant, obviously, to the Torah approach because it's part of what makes us up as a Christian. So I don't want to be stopping them from voicing their opinion, but we want everybody's opinion within the body of Christ to be respectful and that we can debate things. And clearly, I know that a lot of these peoples and groups aren't trying to become like Hebrew roots or, abolish the New Testament, but there's a balance here. And where I sort of fall on this whole kind of thing is that the Old Testament law was created for Israel, for the world as well, but specifically for Israel and Judah as it split into two kingdoms. And they were created as a nation of priest kings. And when Jesus comes along, he didn't abolish the law. He actually came to fulfill the law, as he says, but he also wanted to free us of the law. And after Jesus' resurrection, you have the Gentile issue and the Christian issue coming into the new covenant being grafted in, as Romans likes to talk about. And it's decided by, the pillars of the Jerusalem church of that time, between James and Peter and Paul and a few others, that they're only going to put certain restrictions on the Gentiles coming in. But the Judean people should probably, still be completely Torah observant, but an exception for the Gentiles. And so there's only a few rules like sacrificing and, drinking blood and things like that are the exceptions. So, but we also need to understand that what Paul was also saying is that if we have the Spirit in us, with the faith of God and the faith of Jesus, is that even though we are free from the law, if we have the Spirit, we are led to fulfill the law. But nobody's going to fulfill it completely. And that's where when people get too Torah observant, they become legalistic. And that was the whole purpose of Jesus and his coming and his teachings and his resurrection, was to take this legalism away so that all can be saved. All that believe in Jesus and all that believe in God can be saved, because nobody except for Jesus, who came in the flesh as the Word who came as in the flesh, was innocent against the law, because the law is judgment, right? It segregates. And nobody is perfect. So without the sacrifice and without the atonement, none would be saved. So yes, we're led to fulfill the law, but it is not to be used to judge us, because we can't live up to the law. Now, as far as how people are approaching Torah observance today, I totally admire that, and I lean in those directions and try and go in more of those directions all of the time, because I think that we're led to do that. But it should never be used as a wedge. It should never be used as judgment, because we don't have the right to judge. That's the domain of Jesus and God. But what we are to be doing is to educate people, and we're not going to be totally on the same page 100% of the time, because I don't know of anybody who 100% agrees with anybody all of the time as a human being. So I think we have to be respectful. We have to understand what's written in the Bible, but we should not cross that line of judgment and using that to divide Christians. And I always like to say, when I'm discussing controversial Christian issues, is that I'm not here to divide Christians. I'm here to try and unite Christians. So I want to be respectful of everybody's positions, but respect has to go two ways.
Yeah, it certainly does. And again, I lean towards some Torah things. In fact, I lean towards the Torah, especially in the area of government and public officials and law. I really lean towards the Torah because I think that it has applications to today's society, especially when we look at the United States government being in so much turmoil and so much corruption, so much chaos. If we went back to some biblical principles, I think that would be great. So my heart tends to go towards some of those things too. And I'm just like you, Gary. I don't want to see any division in the body of Christ. There are those that are making it a salvation issue. There are those that say it's not really a salvation issue, but it's still necessary and good. And then there are those that say, what good does it fulfill if it's not producing good fruit, which is sharing the good news and the gospel of Jesus Christ and the salvation and what he did on the cross among non-believers. It seems if we're going in the direction of, look, you've got to be completely Torah observant or you're going to hell. In fact, I read a blog where somebody said, if you eat bacon, you're going to hell. You're not saved. That was pretty, I really, that bothered me to in a big degree. And that's why I said, I got to take this whole issue on.
Yeah, and I think you raise a very, very good point there. And so there's a whole, and of course, you know, the Catholic Church is big on works, but and you know that's part of the salvation process. And I go back to the very, very basics. Is what we're clearly told is that only your faith, not works, counts. But I would also say this, that if you have the Spirit in you, is that would tend to want to manifest itself, and therefore you would do good works, right? But you got to get it in the right order. It's your faith in Jesus first. That's the only qualification for salvation. And if you have that Spirit in you, then you will probably do good works.
Absolutely. In fact, you know, when I read, you know, faith without works is dead, my brain puts in non-works, puts the non in front of works, because with all the things that I struggled with in my life, my faith and my belief in Jesus Christ, my belief in God, will lead me to not do some things. Those are my non-works. I'm not going to go down those paths that really, as Paul said, are not profitable. They're not going to edify. They might be lawful, but they're not profitable extremely for my soul and in the terms of salvation. So I always put that non in front of it. Maybe I'm weird, but to me, that's what faith without works is dead.
Yes. Well, it leads you to try to non-sin first, right?
Right.
And not to sin, and then to do good things because you've been changed and you've been transformed. And the reason why it needs to be in that order in terms of how I approach things, and in my opinion and conclusion on these things, is that we see all the time where people put up this sort of virtuous signaling of doing good works, which makes me a really, really good person, but it's not done in the right spirit, right? You have to get things in the right order. So you have to have faith in Jesus and the right spirit, and to do it for the right reasons.
Absolutely. And you know, I go back to this with the whole Torah observant thing. It's like, oh, look at me, I'm following the Torah, I'm not eating bacon, I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. You know, Christ came and he lived the Torah for a very specific reason. That's because no one else could do it. No real man could do it. He was without sin. So he lived it for a specific purpose. But you had the heresies and the Pharisees and all these hypocrites within the temple that Jesus even said, you're it's a den of vipers, you're thieves. He came out and he told them that, look, you are hypocrites. And I see that kind of coming now, too, with this division of the body of Christ, is that we have some people who may be elevating themselves, and I'm not going to judge them for it, but it almost seems like we have a whole new generation of Pharisees.
Yes, we do. And we have to watch out for that legalism, but not allow complete sort of corruption of doctrine and things like that. And I think, you know, a couple of the classic examples is about what Jesus was bringing to us in terms of how to approach these things was, when he broke the Sabbath law, right?
Right.
And he was basically saying that, no, I mean, that it's the spirit of the law as much as the law. I mean, you can break the law because you break the spirit of the law and not help somebody on the Sabbath, right? It's not designed to let people die or let people be hurt. It's it's a day of rest. It's a holy day, but it's a day of rest. And just as with Mary, being stoned to death. I mean, who's going to raise the first stone, right? It's not that she sinned. It's just that all of us have sinned, right? Yeah. So we have to understand what he came to do with the law.
Yeah, and there are those that say, not one jot or tittle until heaven and earth have passed away was taken away from the law until it is fulfilled. And there are many people that say Jesus fulfilled the law. It was finished. That's what he said on the cross when the veil was torn in the temple. And he may have been referring exactly to the Mosaic covenant.
Yeah, and so did he abolish the law? I don't think he abolished the law. I think he abolished the weight of the law if you are loyal and believe in Jesus and believe in God. I mean, just as the sacrifices in the temple was done before that to atone for the sins. That's what his atonement is for. Not that we're not sinning and not that there isn't the law. It's just that how that law will be applied permits us to be saved.
Right. Gary, we're coming up on a break here, and I, for one, am really glad that I don't have to go and sacrifice an animal, because that's a mess. So when we come back, Gary Wayne and the Genesis 6 conspiracy. Everybody stay tuned.
are TFR.
My faith in destiny is all I need to prevail.
Truth Frequency Radio.
I'll bust it one time. Truth and liberty. Fighting the new world order and the tyranny. The Awakening Liberty Show with Sean Carone.
And we are back, the Awakening Liberty Show, right here on truthfrequencyradio.com. It's great. We are live and we are worldwide, all across America, all around the world. The number to call in is 213-233-3998. Again, that number is 213-233-3998. If you got any questions or comments, you want to join in the conversation with what Gary and I are going to be talking about today, feel free to join us. Absolutely. We are also live on IPMNation.com. I'd like to welcome everybody there, iHeartRadio and the TuneIn Network. And before we bring Gary back up here again, I would like to let everybody know the Awakening Liberty Store is open for business. It's the best in non-GMO emergency food and survival gear. Stop by, check it out. And in celebration of my return to broadcasting, I'm doing the biggest sale I've ever done. Use coupon code ALS25. Again, that's coupon code ALS25, Awakening Liberty Show, ALS25. Get 25% off your entire order. There's a lot of great things there, so stop by, check it out. Getting yourself prepared for an emergency or anything that happens in life, whether it's going to be a full financial collapse or a hurricane or a tornado or something that happens where you need to be able to feed your family. It's not that expensive to actually start just putting a little bit aside so that you and your family are safe in the event of a catastrophe of some sort. So definitely check out awakeninglibertystore.com and use that coupon code ALS25 to get 25% off of your entire order. My guest today, and I'm just excited to have him back, Gary Wayne, author of The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Mankind. And Gary, let's we're going to get into chapter 13 here, Lucifer's Revenge, here in a minute. But why don't you give everybody an overview of this book and what it entails?
Yeah, it's a journey. There's no doubt about that. So it's a transgenerational investigation into what I call the House of Dragon, or the descendants of the Nephilim, who are the offspring of the sons of God in Genesis 6. So it begins in Genesis 6 in terms of how the antediluvian world is going to have this organizational structure that is going to partner to bring the antediluvian world to its knees and bring about the first apocalypse by fire. And in that, it's the descendants of Cain, the development of the seven sacred sciences, as the Masonic organizations like to say, that then create the sun cult and the bull cult of the antediluvian culture, and the secret societies and the mystery schools to develop these disciplines, and then how that knowledge interacts and blends with the knowledge of the gods or the fallen angels, as scripture talks about it, and how they partner to create the Nephilim to be the kings and the warriors of the world, and to put all of humankind under their domain. Then how these peoples and organizations and beliefs cross the flood, how they affect our history, what they're doing today, and how they plan to bring upon the end time and present their dragon Antichrist in the not so distant future.
It is certainly a journey, and you just lay it all out so very, very well. When we talk about the sons of God, Genesis 6 really was one of the strangest things to me, and everybody knows this who listened to my show before, but for those of you that don't, I was going to become a priest, and I've said this before, I kissed a girl at 13, my hair got curly, and I forgot all about it. But at the same time, I was in some pre-seminary classes, and I asked about Genesis 6 several times, not once, not twice, but 3 times. I asked about Genesis 6 and who the sons of God were and what this story was all about. I never got a good response. In fact, I was sent to the dean's office 3 times by a sister, a nun, and it was very confusing to me, and it actually led me, because I wasn't getting answers, it led me down a different road, and I moved away from Christ. I moved away from God. I went down the metaphysical route. I studied all that stuff. And, if I'd had an answer back then that was so pertinent, like what your book talks about, I probably would have been better off.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon. I mean, in seminary schools today, whether it's in Catholicism or in Protestantism, is they don't teach this aspect of the Bible, and they don't teach a lot about prophecy either. And it's by design. And again, this is one of these issues, particularly that's been used in the last few hundred years, because this was common doctrine right across Christianity, that these giants existed and they were procreated from the angels of heaven. But today it's one of these issues, because of what's going on in the seminary schools, that this doctrine is not taught, and that the idea of sons of God mating with humans is impossible, and also that the idea of giants is greatly exaggerated. So again, I'm not wanting to divide Christians on this subject, and I respect everybody's point of view, but when you dig beneath the surface and you find out that, no, this thing did happen as the Bible lays it out, and I believe the Bible should be understood literally, and everything defined within the Bible is there for you to find to understand the allegories. And so I think this is part of the preparation for the end time. And so that they can shape us and brainwash us in other aspects, because polytheism is full of these giants, which is going to be the end time religion. And we see that happening in all of our entertainment today, particularly with the superheroes, which are based on the Nephilim of old. And, Superman is the classic sort of brainwashing as being this hero of old, and hero of old is part of the translations of the English translations, which is also in the King James Version and others as the mighty ones. And heroes comes out of the Greek mythology as being the offspring of gods and humans, just as Zeus would be the father of Hercules, and Poseidon the father of Atlas, and Magog and Gog, and a few other giants. And so these were the demigods, which were again known as the offspring in the ancient world of the gods and human females, just as described in Genesis 6. So they're overlaying their propaganda onto the meaning, meanwhile deceiving Christians that this didn't take place. And I have a complete biblical document and lays it all out for people on how the sons of God are angels as understood in the Old Testament. If people want to get a hold of me through my website and ask for that document, I'll send it to you on email. Just as I have another document on a biblical case why the sons the sons of God couldn't be the ones known as the sons of God in the New Testament or Sethites in the Old Testament, because that is an adoption process after your death and because of the resurrection. And I lay that all out. And the quick sort of understanding as to why we know these are sons of God, are angels in Genesis 6, is that if you go to Job 1:6-1 and 38:4-7, you have sons of God with the same understanding that they're presenting themselves before God in heaven, and humans don't do that. And in other translations, it's not the sons of God, it's angels that's used, or there's a note saying that the sons of God are angels, because that's how it was understood in the ancient concept. And when you look at Job 38 as the classic example, is this is when the sons of God and the morning stars, they sang at the creation of the heavens. And there's no way humans were there then. So these sons of gods couldn't be them. And they're the same sons of God, sons of the Most High, that's talked about in Psalm 82. And so I'll walk people all the way through a whole bunch of different meanings, whether it's the host, it's the sons of God, it's angels, sons of the Most High, and all the applications for angels, and show you how they interconnect in meaning in that document. So I lay out a scriptural case for that, but I do recognize that there's a belief out there that these were just an exaggeration of humans. But when we look at giant as it translates back from the King James Version Bible into Hebrew, that's the word Nephil, with Nephilim is what most people would understand that as, and the I am is the male plural aspect, just as Seraph is a fiery serpent angel, and Seraphim, who I believe were the parents to these original Nephilim, is again that male plural sort of aspect. And so that definition is a tribe of giants. And again, I don't believe that that's exaggerated, and we do get documentation of some comparisons and some specific dimensions, particularly to Goliath and to Og in terms of the size of those beings. And this is over 2,000 years after the original creation, before the flood. So with that sort of understanding in terms about what's going on with the meaning from the literal perspective, is what they don't want us to understand is that there is a bloodline genealogy and a possible recreation to these Nephilim in the end time. And it's to numb Christians and to be unprepared for what's going to happen, and then to buy into the propaganda that they're going to set forward.
Right. And, you made a good point there talking about Hollywood, because some of the biggest series right now on Netflix are the Marvel Comics series. And this is all about people with these powers, and they're greater than humans, all of this stuff. So it really goes, and again, I'm going to go back here to the fact that how much clarity the Genesis 6 conspiracy brought to me was because I realized that there was an intermingling of the gene pool, an incursion, if you will, that separated the species, humanity, and then obviously the Nephilim, these descendants of these giants as they move forward in history. So there was an incursion of some sort. Can you talk about that? I mean, we're talking about the garden, right?
In terms of the incursion?
Yes.
Well, certainly we know Satan was in the garden, as he was described in Ezekiel 28. But I'm not convinced that there was a gene pool intercession in the Garden of Eden. I know a number of people take the serpent seed back to that happening in Eden, but if it did happen, there was a serpent seed from Satan and Eve that would likely have happened after Eden. But the way it's understood allegorically, and I'm a literalist, which is why I don't look at the Eden incursion as being there, because you have to take everything out of context with the narrative to understand seduce as a sexual nature, and then try and match that up with the rest of the narrative, which it can't, because the tree is clearly for fruit of eating and for knowledge of good and evil, nothing to do with sex. So it's completely out of context with the narrative. But certainly we have that as Satan intervening himself into the, which is, I think, is your point, into the destiny and what he would hope would be the fate of humankind. But God is Alpha Omega, so he knew all of this was going to happen, and the only way all of this can work is through free choice anyways, and God is greater than free choice. So you have a stumbling with Lucifer's first revenge, as I like to call it, in chapter 13, where he tries to bring down humankind. And why does Lucifer, as he's called in the King James Bible, which is actually, a Hebrew word, hell, so I prefer to use the word Satan in most cases, but Lucifer is what the spurious forces like to call their god in the West. And that's, comes right out of Masonry as Lucifer and the great architect of the universe, and the same labels as you go up that secret society ladder. So what Satan is trying to do is his revenge is because he has already lost his rebellion. And now he's trying to salvage it. And he knows Adam and then Eve, who's created from Adam, and then the descendants are somehow going to be raised in the future time above angels. He's not quite sure how, but what he knows is he's got to stop humankind. So he's going to do a series of things that are going to try and bring down humankind. In Genesis 6, as I like to call it, is his second revenge, where he inserts the DNA and the bloodlines of a hybrid being of humans and fallen angels that are designed to lead humankind into destruction and completely destroy them and prevent them from being raised above angels, as Hebrews talks about in chapter 2, as being, a brother of Jesus, and Jesus is raised higher than angels. And just as the Psalms will talk about our greater authority that we're created for, but not nearly as specific as what Hebrews will talk about it in that sort of respect. So he's trying to prevent that. So the first thing he's trying to do is make sure that they're going to fall. And that's why he seduces Eve, who then convinces Adam, and they eat of the tree of good and evil, and they do their fall. But again, God is greater than free choice. So all of this is going to be played out through free choice, where angels didn't have that kind of free choice. Angels were created immortal from the beginning, and only with the ability to choose to follow God or not after that creation and immortality. And so many of them did not. And we're not sure how many rebelled or whether or not there are ones that are still rebelling. What we do know is in Revelation, right in the beginning of the book of Revelation, tells us there was 10,000 times 10,000 angels. And in Revelation 12, we're told that 1/3 of them, by that point of the midpoint of the last 7 years, will have rebelled. So at least 33 million, but other accounts says the number is uncountable. So I'm not sure that we know the exact number, but we know there's a large rebellion that takes place. And so the whole thing that is going on is that to justify their rebellion and to ensure there isn't going to be a being that's going to be raised up and then judge the angels for what they've done to us, is to lead them into destruction.
Absolutely. And it's kind of a good segue, because as we're getting into chapter 13, I'm going to get into the first paragraph here because I think it is just so perfect. But there are a lot of people, and you sort of touched on this, but I want to ask the question directly. Some people say that Satan is not Lucifer and vice versa. Are they the same entity?
Well, I think they are. And again, I don't like to use the word Lucifer because that's a Latin word inserted for a Hebrew word into the English language, which makes no sense. But it's there. And what I would say, though, in terms of making the connection to Satan is that in Isaiah 14:12 that I'm talking about, is you have this being called Lucifer in the King James Version Bible that wants to create a realm on his own, and he falls from heaven. We also get the same sort of count in Ezekiel 28 and Ezekiel 32 of this fall of this very, very powerful being, and also in Ezekiel 38 called cherub, which I can touch on why he's a cherub and a seraphim down the road, but I don't want to distract from the answer that we're doing right now. And so how we know that Satan and Lucifer are the same being is because one of the things I like to do on everything possible is rely on what Jesus says first. Whether it's prophecy or it's doctrine, and place all of that around what Jesus says, because he's the Word of God. He is the scripture that we have, and he's the spirit of prophecy. And so when I turn to Luke 10:18, Jesus clearly says he saw Satan fall from heaven. And I think that's a clear link that he's identifying Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, and Ezekiel 32 as describing the same kind of being.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, when Jesus also said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no man comes to me except through me, because I go to the Father. And then we look at, is it John, that says, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God. I mean, that is Christ. He is the epitome of God. He is God, and he's brought that forth to us, which, I'm just grateful that God had this under control, because this whole deal, and you put it so well in the first paragraph, is that humankind's unexplained plight is analogous to an experimental drama being played out before the angelic realm, where the outcome will condemn or justify the angelic rebellion. Will all humankind rebel, bow to Lucifer, and cause its own extinction? Or will the elect still choose God through free choice, even when the mainstream of humankind ushers in the dominion of Lucifer? And I always go back to 2 Timothy, and people want to ask themselves, are we in the end of days? Are there things happening that are prophetic? 2 Timothy 3, but mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. If you want to look at some prophecy in the Bible, and you look at what's going on today and what's being encouraged by the powers that be, there it is, right there. It's right in black and white, and then you look at life, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, and the size of that end-time deception that is being planned and plotted right now, and preparing this generation, is preparing people to be like that, as what Timothy talks about. And we can't imagine what the size of those deceptions are going to be, but you can expect everything's going to be counterfeited, just as in Isaiah 14, Satan wants to have a realm and be raised up like God. And that's what they were fighting for.
I don't believe myself like the Most High. He wanted to raise himself above God.
And so he wants a realm like God. He wants a kingdom like God. He wants to be recognized like God. And so to deceive everybody in the end time, there's going to be all of these counterfeit things that come along, like the false prophet, like false miracles, like the false Christ, like a false Armageddon, like a false everything, to deceive people and not to understand what Jesus said first on everything, and understanding the Bible literally. So it's all sort of interconnected. And humans, weren't created with the same immortality that angels were. We were created mortal first, even though Adam and Eve could have physical immortality by eating from the tree of life, as long as they didn't break the one rule they were given in the Garden of Eden. But they didn't. But we were mortal beings. And after Adam, who had access to God, who still chose not to follow that one rule, after that, how humans are going to be raised through free choice is with very little information from God, without immortality, and we must choose God on faith and choose it every day and continue on that, no matter how difficult it is, to show our loyalty with very little knowledge, whereas angels had complete access, an intimate relationship with God, and saw how powerful he was.
And, and there's a reward involved in this, of turning from habitual sin and not choosing independence, but choosing a cohesion with God, our creator, our everything. There's a reward involved, and we touched on this earlier, whereas we will one day judge the angels.
Yeah, because of the revenge that they've been taking to justify their rebellion. To understand why we're here, what things are all about, we have to understand what happened in prehistory with the angelic rebellion, because everything that rolls out of that rebellion and then begins with the creation of Adam to resolve the rebellion, and then all the things that happened to Adam and Eve and the descendants of Adam and Eve thereafter to prevent them from completing their mission and their destiny, is because of the fallen angels. And all the horrible things that go on in this world are because of the fallen angels, and that Adam and Eve chose free choice and to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to try and be like God, which is the same promise and have the knowledge that comes with it that Satan was promising Eve and Adam is what they're going to be promising in the end time. All of the evils derive from that free choice to live away from God. But
Right.
Again, God is greater than free choice. So through free choice, he will still redeem humans.
And he's going to redeem us. He's already done it. Jesus Christ did it. He actually went into the abyss during the time that he was dead in the tomb and told the angels it is finished. When we come back, I'm going to get into a second paragraph here, and I want to get your on the other side of the break here. We're going to talk a little bit about this. I'm going to read this right now, but this is a drama designed to prove whether or not the ways of Lucifer should be allowed to dominate the physical universe. A drama predetermined to play out over 6,000 years, beginning with the fall of Adam. And my question to you, you can kind of think about this over the break. My question to you is, where do you come from on the young Earth versus old Earth? Obviously, creationism versus evolution. I would really like to get your take on that, because I'm of the opinion, from what I've seen in movies like the Genesis History, that we are not living on a 6 billion year old planet. Now it's been upgraded to 60 billion years old. We are actually living on a very, very young Earth, and I would love to get your take and your input on where you stand on that, whether you are young Earth or you are older Earth, and what your thoughts are on that. Everybody, the Awakening Liberty Show with my guest Gary Wayne, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, how secret societies and the descendants of giants plan to enslave humankind. Everybody stay tuned. We're going to be right back.
Hi, my name is Ella.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
Hi, everyone. This is Sean from the Awakening Liberty Show. Are you and your family prepared for an emergency? Have you ever thought about investing in food and water storage? Well, if you have, I urge you to check out my one-stop prepper shop. AwakeningLibertyStore.com carries the full line of Legacy Premium, non-GMO, made in USA emergency food storage and survival gear. Folks, I've tried them all, and Legacy Premium is the best I've found. Boasting the lowest cost per pound, the lowest cost per calorie, and the largest serving size in the industry, Legacy Premium is simply the best. Not to mention it was voted best tasting in blind taste tests, and I personally concur. Shop AwakeningLibertyStore.com and use coupon code PATRIOT for a special listener discount, or call me personally at 775-276-4046. Once again, AwakeningLibertyStore.com.
And welcome back to the Awakening Liberty Show right here on TFRlive.com. All across America, all around the world. The number to call in if you would like to join the conversation, 213-233-3998. Again, that number is 213-233-3998. We are live and worldwide with my guest, Gary Wayne. Just want to say hello to the chat room. We've got Sophia Bott, Dr. Kayak, TFR Wookie, all alone. You are not all alone. The Lord is with you always. Rebecca G. Cracking, welcome to the show. Welcome IPM Nation listeners. Welcome iHeartRadio listeners in the TuneIn Network. So glad that you can join me on this Saturday. It is cold and snowing here. Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Great conversation so far. At the end of the last hour, I asked a question in regards to this old earth paradigm, the modern cosmology that says we've been around for billions and billions and billions of years, like Carl Sagan used to say. What is your take on this? Is this just a deception by the powers that be, these descendants of giants that have propagated this lie of evolution?
It's hard to know how much of what science and education teach is fact and which is propaganda. And that's the real difficulty. And so all we can do is rely on what Scripture says and sort of measure up what everything else is said and done in this world against what is used in Scripture. So when it comes to how old the earth is, I'm a bit agnostic on that, to be truthful. I'm fine with the earth being older, and I'm fine with it being about 6,000 years old. And so for me, it's not a matter of faith, but I don't believe the Bible contradicts itself, and I don't believe the Bible is inaccurate. So now you start to get into kind of a complex web when I start stating some of my views, and I say that the Bible is literal. I think the angelic rebellion, which is what we've been talking about in Lucifer's revenge, when that rebellion takes place, fits better into an older world than a younger world, but it's not necessary. So you could have that rebellion taking place in, say after verse 1, Genesis 1-2, after that. And again, a lot of Kabbalistic and Gnostic doctrine would suggest that when the waters are separated, that's an allegory for when that rebellion would have taken place. So there's some arguments there, but for me, I'm agnostic on it. But I get asked a lot, well, why, when it looks so straightforward that there's a 6-day creation, do you think that there's a possibility for what they call the gap theory? I prefer to call it the renewal of the earth theory. And there's a good reason for why I'm a little bit open to that. And I think it's good to be a bit agnostic if you understand Scripture, where you come from that agnosticism. Being agnostic, not Gnostic, if you can base what you believe in what Scripture says. And so Genesis 1:1 to 1:2 has a significant probability and possibility of being able to be translated two ways out of ancient Hebrew. And the first thing that I would point to when I say something like that is that, again, and I don't believe the Bible contradicts itself, and I believe it gives more information to help you understand these things. So in verse 2, when it says, "And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters," you also have a companion verse that's in Psalm 104:30. And what Psalm 104:30 says is, "Thou sendest forth thy Spirit, they are created, and thou renewest the face of the earth." And that is, I mean, the Bible doesn't use words in ways that are loose. They're all interconnected. And so, again, when you look at what Jesus says, always look at how accurate and specific and how he uses words that ties in all of the Old Testament when he speaks. And so that leads to an idea that there could have been a renewal of the earth. Well, why would there have been a requirement for a renewal of the earth? Well, maybe it was destroyed, and maybe it was because of the angelic rebellion that destroys the earth, and then it has to be renewed, which starts this commission there. He's going to create Adam in Eden, who's going to resolve the angelic rebellion. And then you dive a little bit deeper into that, and you get into the some other words like tuhu and buhu and that's in there. So in Genesis 1:2, after it has, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth," it says, "And the earth was created." And is used as a utilization there without a Hebrew word to go with it as an inference, as suggesting a pause or a gap. So suggesting something was in between and something may have happened there. Again, I'm just making why you could use a biblical case here for an older earth. And then the word "was" comes from the Hebrew word "haya," meaning to exist or become or come to pass or come into being. And so when it says the earth was without form, this has a possible translation of as it became formless and void. Came without form and void. And then when you move into the word "form," that's the Hebrew word "tuhu." And that means desolation, desert, and to lie and exist in vain or in chaos or in confusion. And yet in Isaiah 45:18, God says that he formed the earth and that he established it. And he didn't create it in vain, but created it to be inhabited. And of course, that word "vain," goes back to the word "tuhu." So he didn't create it voidless. And so you combine those two and you get the understanding that the world may have become void. And then when you have the word "buhu," it is meaning waste and indistinguishable. And again, God wouldn't have created a ruin, which is what "buhu" is really suggesting there. And so that's why there's this theory of you can translate Genesis 1:1 to 1:2 as what they call the gap theory, that there was a space here where through the angelic rebellion, possibly the world is destroyed, and then you have the renewal that's going on. And I have a complete document on this. If people want to get a hold of me, it walks through it biblically on how you could translate it that way. But again, for me, I don't use that as a pillar for faith. Is I understand how it could be translated into Hebrew both ways. I'm fine either way.
Yeah, I don't think it makes any sense in the larger scope of things, or the bigger picture, which is obviously Christ and what he did for us on the cross. Absolutely. I don't want to spend a whole lot of... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I just wanted to finish that. There's one other thing that, because I also like to link in the New Testament when I talk about these things. And again, this is a really fun argument. Just don't make it, a legalistic position for your salvation. But in 2 Peter 3:5, starting actually in 3:4. I won't read the whole verse. I'll just sort of paraphrase what it's talking about. It's talking about, the heavens of old, and the earth standing out of water and in water. And then in verse 6 it says, whereby the world was being overflowed with water, and it perished. And most people think that that's referring to the flood, except that the world didn't die. That's what perished means.
Right.
And then in verse 7 it says, but the heavens and earth which are now, are being kept in reservation for a judgment by fire, which is the end time. Right. So all of that suggests that there was a destruction where the world destroyed, and somehow through a water process, just as on the renewal of the earth, and the renewal of the earth theory uses, you have a separation of the waters that's going to recreate the earth, right?
Right. Yeah, and is the movie is Genesis History talks about all of our geological formations, the Grand Canyon, the mountains, all being formed in an instant. And that would very much lead to what you're talking about there, is obviously an early deluge before Noah's flood that could have caused all of this and created the world that we live in today.
Yeah, and it also says, okay, so now you had a world before that's dominated by beings that look like seraphim angels, the dinosaurs. Right? Because seraphim angels, and again, or before the flood, you could have that same thing. I mean, we don't have to put a date on it, but we know they had governance over the earth before the flood, and if there was a time before in the gap, then they were also reigning that. And we also understand that dinosaurs today now have feathers, which again matches up quite well with that serpentine type look, right? And a seraphim angel, if people aren't aware of it, you get that out of Isaiah 6, where it talks about the seraphim or the seraphs, depending on which English translation that you're reading. But seraphim, as being the plural of them, these were ministering type of angels that worked in the throne of God, serving God in the fiery stones. And seraphim means fiery serpent angel. And so you put wings and feathers on a seraphim angel, you have like a flying dragon, you have a flying reptilian angel, you have the plumed serpent or the feathered serpent, or you have these dragon angel gods around the world, or these serpent-like angel gods around the world, and they all have the same meaning because dragon or serpent in ancientology meant the same thing.
It's the velociraptors. I completely agree with you. I think you nail it there. Absolutely. And did you have anything else to say on that? Because I got another question for you.
Well, I was just going to say, and everything that they tend to seemingly create thereafter or partner with has that serpentine type of look to it. So whether or not it's the Nakash in Eden, right, which is the serpent, which is an intelligent walking, talking being, probably some even had wings before it is coached or avatared by Satan to deceive Eve. And then you have these reptilian type of serpent kings and demigods created by mating with human females in Genesis 6. So it's, again, this continuation of this reptilian world that they seem to have created with these dinosaurs before.
Yeah, and you see it all over the world in other cultures, in the archaeology and the architecture. You see this, it's a reoccurring theme all over the world. Now, when we're talking about the gap theory, too, it raises another question of mine. And you go over this in the book a little bit, and that's the race of day 6.
Yeah, so I'm a lot more on doctrine on day 6 versus Eden as I am with being agnostic on the gap theory. I look at day 6 as being a separate creation than Adam and Eve in the Eden account. And again, I have a document on this if somebody wants to know, because I can't reconcile day 6 with the Eden account, and I don't believe the Bible is in contradiction. There's just way too many differences. and a complete order of creation. And the biggest thing is you have people in day 6 being created in multiple, male and female at the same time, and being told to spread out around the earth and multiply. Well, Adam is created individually, set into the garden, and then Eve is created sometime afterwards because a suitable partner couldn't be found. And that is such an odd comment. Like, if they're the only ones on Earth, what are they talking about in terms of a suitable partner? Either unsuitable humans or unsuitable beasts. But why would there even be a consideration for other animals to be a partner for God? Unless you're talking about the Nakash, which would be, and we don't get when and how they're created, but probably in the day 6 account as well, right? Or days 4 through 6, because it's an intelligent, speaking, walking, talking animal. And so we get just so many things that are different on this. And you have the people of day 6 that are basically described as nomads, hunters, and gatherers. But clearly, Adam is put in the garden to be an agrarian and a farmer. And when you get into the language of what's in the garden, it's clearly an agrarian type of description, where you're having, shrubs and things that are coming up from the ground, and Adam is to till them and to look after it. And again, I think this is that agrarian influence that comes after the Garden of Eden, after falling, that is now transplanted to these other peoples around the earth and starts to domesticate them into communities and into farming and ranching.
Absolutely. And the other question that comes up is, when Cain was obviously banished, he was set asunder to go walk amongst the world, but he started his own families and he had offspring. Who was he having them with if Adam and Eve were the only ones there?
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And if you follow the chronology in terms of the events, I mean, this happens immediately after Cain is ostracized, right? And so he goes to a place where there's already a place called Nod. And there's seemingly people there because he takes a wife and he builds a city. City for who? If there was, I mean, A, we don't know who his wife is, and B, why would you build a city? And then they have Enoch, and they're going to build other cities after that. And cities are for multiple people living in and for protection. And so again, protection from who? And in the biblical account, we don't get any accounts of other siblings of Cain and Abel until Seth is born, and then that's at the 130-year point of Adam's life that we're told other sons and daughters are born. But yet, Cain seems to be ostracized at somewhere early in adulthood, but let's say he's even 40 years old or 50 years old. It doesn't matter, because after 130 years, Seth is born, and then sometime later, other siblings are born. So who does he find? I think it has to be these people of day 6, and this is one of the accounts of how what Cain is taught by Adam in terms of what he learns in the Eden account on an agrarian lifestyle is being transplanted to the hunters and gatherers of day 6.
And I completely agree with you there. The race of day 6 it had to be there. And like I said, when I look at Cain, and he was ostracized and he went out and he took a wife. Where was that wife coming from? So the race of day 6 has a lot of merit to it as well.
Well, and Genesis 1:28 is very, very odd, where it says, be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth in the King James Version. And so I answer this question all the time, so I've got a document for people on the word replenish, that it meant not how we understood replenish today, but when you follow the etymology back, it always had two meanings. And I don't believe the King James translators chose a word that was could be ambiguous, right? They were trying to translate as accurately as they could even though I disagree with the Lucifer translation, but I think that's for a different reason. But they're trying to accurately translate. But again, you could take that back to Hebrew to translate it either way, in terms of replenish or just fulfill the earth. If you take that back to Hebrew. So, but it's just odd that language just sort of subtly sort of hints at that all of the time.
I can't help but wonder if this has anything to do with Rh negative factor blood types and whatnot, but there's like this separation of the species, which is bizarre. That's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
The next segment, we're going to get into who the Nephilim are today and what they're masquerading as. But one of the things that I love so much about your book is you go into so many of the other world spiritual texts. And when we talk about the whole thing with Lucifer and Satan and this race of giants, I mean, it is being corroborated by multiple other texts. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, this whole story in Genesis is not an isolated story, just as the flood isn't an isolated story. And the flood story is in over 500 cultures all around the world, and that's sort of root cultures. So it's on all continents, all religions, around the world, other than obviously Antarctica, but we don't know what we'll find under Antarctica. So I'll be agnostic on Antarctica.
We don't even know what Antarctica is.
Yeah. So, and in all of these stories, they're related to the corruption of the world, creation of giants, and survival stories of Nephilim or humans. And there's two different sources, but the greatest number of these stories are the survival of the Nephilim. So the best analogy of the Genesis story comes out of the Atlantis story, which is why the polytheists keep Atlantis so vivid, and it'll have an end time implication as well. But Poseidon, or as he's also known in mythology, Iapetus, and so you have a couple of virgins that are telling the same story about the same god and the same human female that he takes, Clymene or Clyto. And again, a few other transliterations of those names as well for people checking me on that, will have 10 Titan or hero kings, including Atlas. And they're going to rule the Atlantean Empire of the antediluvian world. And this is the golden age. This is the pinnacle of the world in terms of advancement of technology and knowledge, and the helm of world government. And this whole Atlantis Poseidon story is exactly the same story that's being told in Genesis 6. And we also get similar accounts throughout the whole world, so that if you understand that heroes, as talked in Greek mythology, are the Nephilim and the offspring of a human female and gods like Atlas and Hercules and Perseus and Theseus and on and on and on, you'll be not surprised to learn that other cultures around the world have the same story of the creation of these giants, and with different names that they might attach to them. So you would have, the Anunnaki in Sumerian mythology. You have the Anunnaki of heaven and you have the Anunnaki of the earth. In the fairy mythos, which is very important for understanding what's going on in the world as it gets into the alien mythos and stuff, you have the fairies and the proud angel who rebels and comes to the earth and comes through portals or holes in the ground, but they create these earthborn fairies, earthborn Tuatha Danann, which would be how they are best known for, with the Tunon being the fair folk or the fair people or the fairy people and the offspring of the fairies. You have the Tengu in Japan. You have the Xibalba and the Kishamaya. You have the Myosi in China. And you have the Azuras, Daitya, and Danawa as examples in the Hindu religion, who are all created in the same way. And what you learn is they're all telling a parallel story to the Genesis account, but through a polytheist lens.
Right. And there are people, and this is something that, and when we look at all of this, we know that Satan wanted to raise himself up above the Most High God, that in fact he probably considered himself a god, which may it may allude to the reason why so many people looked at the gods. It was something that they looked at. I mean, certainly there are people that say they're Reformed monotheists because they recognize that there was a divine council, that God actually was the Most High, yet he had others that were almost as powerful as him, Michael, Satan. Obviously, this was some sort of pantheon. Is it wrong to look at it that way?
No, I think there's a hierarchy in God's government with him at the top, and Jesus and the Word sitting at his right-hand side. And similarly, they create the same counterfeit in the polytheist religions and cultures of prehistory and what they continue to present today. So you're going to have, just as you have 7 is the sort of number that is used in polytheism of rebellious leaders of angels, and then you would have Satan or an equivalent to Satan, above that. That is the same pantheon that is around the world, just with different vernacular names.
Right.
And so in heaven, you have 7 angels around the throne of God, probably the archangels. Right. So you have that sort of counterfeit replication that I like to keep referring to, that they don't do anything new. Nothing is new under the sun. They can only counterfeit.
Hold on, Gary. We're going into a break. So everybody stay tuned. We're going to be right back with Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy.
No hype, no fear. We are TFR
Frequency Radio.
I'll bust it one time. Truth and liberty. Fighting the new world order and the tyranny. The Awakening Liberty Show with Sean Carone.
And we are back, the Awakening Liberty Show, right here on truthfrequencyradio.com, all across America, all around the world. The number to call in is 213-233-3998. Again, that number is 213-233-3998. And we're going to just hop right back in here. Gary, you want to go ahead and kind of finish up your thoughts from the last segment?
Yeah, I think I was pretty much finished on that. I know there's a few other directions that we can go, but I think I pretty much got my thoughts in on that.
Okay, good deal. Because my next, where I want to go now is a little different. We're gonna get into who they are today, but I wanted to bring up a couple of things, because you refer to the angelic rebellion as some sort of celestial mafia. I love that. I love the way you put that in the book. But there were two classes of fallen angels, and we'll get there in a second. But I want to reiterate that these angels did not foresee, as you write in the book, God creating the resurrection of humankind into the eternity in the spirit realm of heaven through the word Jesus. That, I think, is where we really need to focus on, because it's so important for people to understand what happened. This whole thing with the word Jesus and through the sacrifice of what he did on the cross and the resurrection was to check this entire angelic rebellion, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And nowhere in their thinking, that I think until it was too late, did they realize that God, being Alpha Omega, knew everything that they were going to do, and that he had this plan through the resurrection of how things were going to take place. And I think that's why you have not only Lucifer's revenge in the beginning against the early Adamites, but you have Lucifer's revenge as he lines up the world to try and destroy the nation of Israel, which is section 3 in my book is all about, to replace Israel with the descendants of Esau by wiping Israel from the face of the earth and inheriting the Messianic blessing and right and the birthright and the blessings that all came down through Isaac and Jacob, and as opposed to Esau, which is the grandfather of Amalek, who the Amalekite nation comes from. And so they were the first nation to attack Israel after the flood. I mean, after
Torah
coming out of Egypt.
The Torah specifically orders through the word of God, the law in Torah, to always defeat the Amalekites, or however you pronounce that. Sorry.
Amalekites, yeah.
Amalekites. It says right there, I can't remember which one it is, and I don't have it pulled up, but I was reading it the other night, and it says that, you always go after them and kill all of them. It's just kind of, to me, that's just strange. It's not something I think we should probably be doing after Christ's death and resurrection. But so when we come down to it, there's this clear violation of the rules set out by God, which was the interjection of angelic DNA into humanity. And these were obviously deviant sexual angels. And this is what, with the, they talk about the legendary 200. They talk about the Watchers, and you talk about in your book that there were two classes of fallen angels. Can you elaborate on that?
Too many classes, but two segregations, I think. So you have, when I talk about classifications in the sort of hierarchical sense, you have cherubim and you have archangels and you have seraphim angels, and but you have ones that were impassioned and ones that weren't impassioned. And what I mean by that is that ones who had sex with human females to violate the laws of creation, and thereby creating physical gods within humans in the physical world by meshing the spirit of heaven with the physical flesh, which ultimately became the Nephilim, which is why God moves to limit their age to 120 years in Genesis 6:3. Amazingly, that's put in between Genesis 6:1 and 6:4 because they're for a reason. Can't have a document to explain all of that. That's not the commission of Noah, because the math doesn't add up with that commission being 100 years. Moving on, though, from that is that this this immortal spirit that's created is only part of the violations against the laws of creation that happen in the antediluvian world, which is why I think we have all of these other really strange beings like Chimera, which is now having a comeback in terms of its wordful use today for genetic modifications. But we have all of these strange beasts that are being created in the antediluvian world, which is, I think, a further corruption, just as the word corruption in the flood story goes back to the word Chakath, which means more than just the violence that was causing the flood. It's the corruption of the whole earth, which is a spoiling and a destroying and a ruining of the whole earth, which I think included the plant genome and the DNA of all the different animals and beings of the earth, that I think they totally destroyed that between the technology that we talked about earlier and the knowledge that they had, and through sexual violation. I think there's two things that were going on there. And so, but not all of the angels did that. So only those impassioned ones, who the ones who violated the laws of creation, were confined to the abyss, where Azazel is, and I think is Abaddon and Apollyon. And I believe that with that being the case, then if there's a second incursion after the flood, which how the Rephaim show up as my preferred position on it,
Sodom and
how
Gomorrah.
they show up at Sodom and Gomorrah or at Bashan or both, and I have a handout on that too, because even when the angels go to Sodom and Gomorrah, they look like humans, but they recognize them as angels, and they want to have sex with them. And as Jude is talking about, it's this strange flesh that they want to have sex with. They're a different species. So I think that concept was very well known that they were trying to do it, and probably, anyways, it's too long of a story to go into right now, but I can link that to Sodom and Gomorrah as being a possible recreation after the flood. So the unimpassioned ones, to get back on point, are still out and deceiving people, just as the demons are out deceiving people. And I believe demons are separate than fallen angels. And again, I have a document that has the biblical case for that. And so if people want to get a hold of me, they can get a hold of that. So we still have all of these deceiving beings and spirits that are trying to lead humankind astray, that represent the gods of the pantheon even to this day.
That's fascinating. And you talk about the demons that run around and just cause ruckus amongst humanity still today, that those are really the spirits of the dying Nephilim from the flood. Is that correct?
At least the ones that were the original generation. And to me, it's speculative as to whether or not after that edict comes into full force with limiting life to 120 years, are the ones that say, let's say the Rephaim after the flood, did their spirits become demons? So what happens is that they were created as demigods in this world. So they had the immortal spirit passed on from the fallen angels that First Enoch likes to talk about as the counterfeit spirit. And this immortal spirit, but the body isn't immortal, just the spirit is. So eventually the body's going to die, especially when you consider the 120-year edict that's put into place. And so their bodies weren't permitted, their bodies died, but their spirits weren't permitted into heaven, and they weren't permitted to sleep like human spirits sleep, waiting for the resurrections. And so these are the ones that roam the earth. And just as Jesus talks about them, they're like in the desert, and they're like thirsting to have a body. And so they need a body to interact with the earth. And that's why they take over a body in this way that is very painful and hurtful, just as we see in possession movies, because it's not an amicable thing going on. They're physically assaulting and trying to take over a body just so that they can interact. And in the end time, I think we're going to see these demons as part of what's going on in the earth, but they won't have to possess a person. They will have the ability to have a clone body made for them, or a transhuman body, or something like that. And demons tend to possess, as we understand it, but coming out of polytheism, we understand another concept, that is the avatar effect, where they create avatars, and that's more of a symbiotic taking over of a body. And you would understand that as Narashima, which is the lion god that Aslan and Tolkien is based on, or Buddha would be another incarnation, just as the New Age Christ consciousness is this avatar effect of one of the fallen angels. And it's an amicable possession partnership of taking over, just as Satan proves that concept is possible, because he avatars Judas to help him get over the hump of betraying Jesus, just as he possibly avatars the cash to carry out that deed in Eden. So we know that that's a possibility. And so we need to understand that these demons are different than the angels, why I lay out that case in the document I was talking about earlier that people can have, and that they need to have a body to interact with the earth. But yes, that's what I write in my book, and I think I make a pretty good case that these are the bodiless spirits of the original Nephilim.
Right. And it's a segue into what I want to get into talking about, is who these people are now, who the Nephilim are now, because obviously they're walking amongst us, but they don't look like giants. It's come to my realization, in my opinion, my viewpoint, is that these same spirits, these demons, these non-angelic beings, but they're still roaming the earth, have already avatared themselves into much of the elite, the ruling class, the banking establishments, that they are already operating in them. And then they have moved that into scientism. And you mentioned the word transhumanism. It seems to me, and things like CRISPR could certainly be maybe looked at as a third incursion, where they are actually trying to develop a new type of chimera, as you said. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think all of that is certainly there and open, and I think that avatar effect is a lot more significant than what most people realize. And I say that because if you get inside and get information in terms of what they believe and what they try and do within the polytheist cultures and the secret societies, is that they do try to create this state where they can interact with these spirits, whether or not it is demon or whether or not it is fallen angel. And you see this with the shamans, for example, and they like to bring in what they call the trickster spirit. And it's part of the crazy sort of clown aspect, all sort of connected in that belief system. And you have also this communication with the Rosicrucians and the Gnostics, where the adepts are able to communicate with the ascended masters.
Yeah.
Right? And that they attain knowledge and wisdom and guidance, and that they also try and have them inside themselves. So they're inviting them in, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that is live and well. How that exactly works, I don't have direct personal witnessing information on this, but I do know they do talk about it, and I do know they use them as their guiding guardian angels, right?
Mm-hmm. They're spirit masters. There's that's what they call them.
Yes.
They're spirit guiders or whatever they call them. I've seen that happen. I've seen people do some very, very strange things while they're saying they're being guided by their spirit, or they're manifesting things in their life with this spirit. And I wonder if those could be relayed to as the Watchers. But I've seen this happen. I've seen people do some very strange things, and it's very concerning to me when people start to mess around in a spirit realm where we really don't have any business being, other than in God.
Yeah. I agree. This is crossing a line, and I think that may have salvation implications further than the second death. I mean, what we do know is once you violate against the laws of the Holy Spirit or blaspheme the Holy Spirit, that sin is not forgiven. It's the only one that's not. And so somehow the angels and the people who take the mark, and probably the worst of all of these people in the world, have, throughout history, have crossed the line that they too will burn in the lake of fire. So, as you mentioned the word watcher, I just wanted to throw out that, that's the term that Enoch uses to describe the angels who went to Mount Hermon, and this high order of seraphim angels that I like to link them to as being the fiery serpent angels of Genesis 6. And again, I like to measure everything against what the Bible says. So we actually do get an account of watchers in the Bible, and that's in Daniel 4, where they are representatives of God and dealing with the governance that comes through them from God for the earth and giving it to whomever they choose. And what's interesting about that is that the watchers, seraphim angels, this high angelic order, were the governors of the antediluvian world. And so I think there's still watchers that are out there that are seraphim, and possibly other orders as well, that are still governing the 70 languages or the 70 nations of the earth that aren't in the abyss. They just have been replaced.
Let's talk a little bit about who you see within the elite today, the secret societies. What are some of the big names that stand out to you that could certainly be considered being infected? I want to say infected, but inflicted by these spirits. You already mentioned the Rosicrucians, but what are some of the other groups that people should pay attention to as to the ones that are actually bloodlines of the Nephilim?
Yeah. So when you get into the lower levels of the secret societies, the Freemasons aren't as high as what people think, although you have to be invited in there. And only at the adept level are you going to be indoctrinated into the doctrines of the great architect and Lucifer, as they like to call them by name. And then above that, you start getting into a pedigree culture of bloodlines. And you need to understand pedigree is so important, so that they've intermarried through the generations with the dynasties and the nobility and the ruling class that they created because of their great strength, both before and after the flood, and have kept this bloodline as pure as possible, but through intermarriage, which we know as, the royal families and the noble elite, right? And so as you move up the secret society list, you get a pure pedigree, and that's why pseudo blue bloods over in North America, whether or not it's the Rockefellers or whatever rich family name, as they come into money and sponsorship, they probably have some diluted bloodlines, but now they have the opportunity to continue to intermarry through the generations for their children to ennoble that pedigree and improve it through the bloodlines. So as you move up through the Illuminati and then up to the Rosicrucians, that becomes that intersection group that has basically the upper half as purebloods. And the lower level may not have purebloods, but quite diluted bloodlines, but do have the Rosicrucian initiation, but they don't get the pureblood initiation from childhood. That's how they can become an adept before they reach that proper age to be recognized. So if you hear somebody talking about a 32nd degree adept, they either don't know what they're talking about, because Scottish Rite is 33rd degree, which is the equivalent in New York of the 3rd degree. But if you're pureblood initiated from childhood, you don't receive that adept title until you're a certain age. So they tend to call themselves a 32nd degree adept. Okay, so if you hear that, that's what's going on with that. But that, again, sort of identifies a sort of bloodline. So all the major organizations around the world funnel into the Rosicrucians, either up through the chain of ladder or directly in. So let's say the Club of Rome would report likely directly into the Rosicrucians. Some people say they report to the Committee of 300 of purebloods, which are above the Rosicrucians. But they're reporting to the top half of the Rosicrucians. They're reporting to the purebloods anyways. And so these groups that are overseeing all of these other groups below, as you go, up to the Western families of 13, sort of at the top of the food chain, these are all claiming genealogies that they have and bloodlines that go back to the original Rephaim or Nephilim before the flood, as most of them claim to before the flood, although they're probably the Rephaim after the flood, and then back to a specific God or a fallen angels, which is that divine right to rule from the Watchers that we were talking about just a few minutes ago. And that's why King James, had that controversial sort of doctrine that he had as having the divine right to rule as being the representative God or being a little God, right? That's where that whole concept comes from, and how you can see it sort of reflected in a semi-modern age. But they do believe they were given this divine right to rule because of this pedigree. So don't look for the names like Rockefeller as being the purebloods. And those aren't the ones who are likely to produce Antichrist. And again, if you understand what I was saying earlier about them initiating purebloods from childhood, understand that they've got, according to the records in the West, and there are bloodlines all around the world, they've got 3 antichrists ready to go. So there's competing families and bloodlines that they're also trying to become the true antichrist, but they've always got ones initiated and ready to go in every generation in case the opportunity comes along. And so these
I put my money on a Sinclair.
Well, St. Clair is definitely on there, and they have, St. Clair are the Sinclairs who found Freemasonry after the demise of the Knights Templar. So it's one of the main groups being reestablished after the fall of the Knights Templar.
Isn't Trudeau married to a Sinclair?
Yes, Pierre Trudeau. His Justin's father married Margaret Sinclair, who's a direct descendant of the Sinclairs, absolutely. And the Sinclairs are the St. Clair, as you accurately described them, from Normandy, right? Who were part of the Normans who take the British throne back to what they believe is their rightful kingship dynasty with William the Conqueror in 1066. And they take their name, they change their name to St. Clair after they expropriate Normandy from the French kingdom in 911, as I recall, with the Treaty of St. Clair. So they take that name. And of course, St. Clair is also one of the battle partners of Hugh de Payan and one of the unlisted members of the original founding Knights Templar in 1090 to 1099. But the original name...
I didn't know that date, 9/11.
Yep.
I wonder, it was my conspiracy hat.
Yeah, maybe it's 9/12. Maybe I've conflated it, but I think it's 9/11 as my memory serves me. 9/11, 9/12 in that zone. And they took their names, changed their names from the Rollo clan of the Vikings. So Rollo is the one who conquers Normandy, and this is the kings that take themselves back to Odin. So this is a northern Viking bloodline that is going to intermarry with the bloodlines coming out of the Middle East as they migrate to Europe to create the Sinclair family. So yeah, they have several bloodlines that go back to different possible progenerating Nephilim and or gods. So there's definitely one of the names. You have to keep in mind the Habsburg-Lorraine dynasty. And the Lorraine is the region where the families ruled that had the names de Bouillon, de Payan, and Anjou. And the Anjou create the Plantagenet, which is King Richard and King John and the Tudor king, and the kings that come down from there, not the Tudor kings, but the Plantagenet kings that come down from there, that are intermarrying again with the Rollo bloodlines of William the Conqueror of England, right? So again, understand that these are all increasing their pedigree because that's how they keep their hierarchy within the cult. So that's another one to keep in mind because they have pedigrees and genealogies of those three families, de Bouillon, de Payan, and Anjou, that take them back to Dagobert, the last survivor of the Merovingian bloodlines, and back to Nephilim bloodlines, and as the Da Vinci Code and Gnostics and other writings believe, and I know Da Vinci Code is a fiction novel, but it's based on Gnostic beliefs that they have Jesus's and Mary Magdalene's bloodline in there, plus King David, plus King Saul. So it's a very noble bloodline that formed eventually came all together in an even a more noble fashion in the Stuart dynasty. So keep the Stuart names out there as possible. As with the Windsors, you can never take them out. Some other names you may want to keep in mind would be Guisers or Joinville or Briand, Sinclair, Deneg, Champagne. But who you want to keep an eye on today, I think, just simply because they have a specific title that is crowned to, originally offered to de Bouillon, but actually is
about
crowned.
20 seconds, Gary.
Okay, but is given to his brother is the crown of Jerusalem, or the King of Jerusalem title that follows the Holy Roman Empire kingships and is owned by the Bourbon family today and the King of Spain. So Antichrist will be crowned as the King of Jerusalem at the abomination. So follow that title.
Gotcha. Gary, thank you so much for joining me. Everybody, we will see you next Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Gary.